It was the kind of late-night shock no one anticipated within the walls of Clarence House. King Charles was left with no choice but to summon security after Prince William stumbled upon something startling inside Camilla's glove box. Before we get into it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss the stories the palace would rather keep hidden. Tonight, we're uncovering a royal bombshell, how one midnight discovery in Queen Camilla's car triggered one of the most explosive confrontations the monarchy has faced in decades. From mysterious steel boxes to Princess Diana's haunting words echoing from the past, this story exposes just how delicate the royal family's image truly is when history refuses to stay buried. It began with a small break in routine. Just past midnight, a royal guard patrolling Clarence House noticed something peculiar about a dark-colored SUV. It wasn't unusual for family vehicles to move in and out, but this one appeared weighed down at the rear, as if carrying more than the usual luggage. When protocol required the vehicle to be inspected, the guard followed his training to the letter: observe, report, and secure. What he discovered was enough to turn a calm night into the start of a palace-shaking scandal. In the boot sat a steel box, heavy, sealed, bolted shut, and completely out of place. This was not the kind of item one would expect to find in Camilla's personal car, especially not something leaving Clarence House under the cover of darkness. The guard's instincts warned him this was no mere family keepsake, and the weight of royal protocol pressed hard. The matter had to be escalated, immediately. Security contacted the chain of command, and within minutes, whispers were spreading through the halls of Clarence House. Camilla's vehicle had been stopped. That's when Prince William, who hadn't been expected at Clarence House that night, arrived without warning. Whether by coincidence or premonition, his timing could not have been more exact. Witnesses later described him as calm, yet gravely serious, taking charge the very moment he was informed about the steel box. William, often viewed as his mother's defender, reportedly ordered the container to be brought inside and demanded it be opened in the presence of witnesses. The atmosphere shifted swiftly from mere suspicion to palpable tension. This was no longer a matter of protocol. It was about trust, legacy, and the truth concealed within a box that should never have been in Camilla's possession. When the bolts were finally loosened and the lid prized open, the room fell completely silent. Inside were neither jewels nor domestic documents, but something far more dangerous: the private letters and diaries of Princess Diana herself. Handwritten, dated, and unmistakably marked with the touch of the late Princess of Wales, these were no casual notes. They were deeply personal writings, long believed to have been lost or destroyed. Yet here they were, hidden away inside a steel box in Camilla's car. From the instant those pages were unveiled, everything changed. For William, the discovery struck at the very heart of his identity, stirring memories of the mother he lost, and reviving the suspicions that had lingered over her final years. For King Charles, who was swiftly notified and compelled to summon senior security, the revelation signaled an immediate and potentially public crisis ready to explode. The question wasn't merely why these letters had resurfaced, but how they had found their way into Camilla's glove box, and what her intentions truly were. Rumors spread quickly. Camilla maintained that the box contained nothing more than family mementos, that it had been handled by her daughter, and that the writings had come into her possession innocently. But those explanations rang hollow when weighed against the reality of the steel container, the secrecy of its transport, and the sensitive nature of what lay inside. The optics were catastrophic. Diana's words, concealed within the car of the very woman so often portrayed as her rival, thrust the royal family into a storm of suspicion they could not easily escape. As dawn approached, Clarence House was anything but calm. Guards whispered, aides hurried between rooms, and senior royals were urgently summoned. The atmosphere was thick with disbelief and unease, as if the very walls knew that history had clawed its way back into the present. William remained resolute, insisting that the writings be secured and examined properly, while others fretted over the scandal should word leak out. King Charles, torn between loyalty to his wife and the enduring legacy of Diana, faced the unenviable task of calling in top-level security and attempting to contain the situation. But containing it was far easier said than done. The letters themselves, once glimpsed by those in the room, revealed something even more disturbing. Diana's handwriting carried not only the tenderness of a mother and the reflections of a princess, but also haunting notes of fear and loneliness from the years following her divorce. The words were explosive, not because they were new, but because they had been hidden, and hidden in a place no one ever imagined they would be found. In the hours after the discovery, the palace transformed into a fortress under scrutiny. No one could credibly explain how Camilla's car came to be carrying a sealed container filled with Diana's most private belongings. Was it carelessness, concealment, or something more deliberate, with motives no one dared to speak aloud? These were the questions lingering in the background as King Charles called in security, and senior aides fought to contain a story too powerful, too emotional, and too symbolic to remain hidden for long. And at the center of it all stood William, staring at the steel box that had just redefined his role forever. To many who later learned of the night's events, the image of William carrying the container out of Clarence House would come to define the moment. He wasn't just Diana's son that night. He was her defender, the one who brought her words back from the shadows. This was the midnight discovery that compelled a king to act, shattered the fragile peace of Clarence House, and reminded the world that Diana's story was far from finished. And as you'll see, what happened next only deepened the scandal and pushed the monarchy into one of its gravest crises since the day of Diana's passing. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter in this extraordinary royal saga. The confrontation that followed the midnight discovery inside Clarence House has since been described as one of the most tense and emotionally charged meetings in modern royal history. Picture the scene. The steel box containing Diana's private letters and diaries had just been retrieved from Camilla's car, its lid forced open, its contents exposed under the watchful eyes of security and senior royals. The headline that would forever define that night, King Charles forced to call security after William found the hidden box in Camilla's glove compartment, was no exaggeration. What unfolded next was less about objects and more about truth, loyalty, and the crushing weight of a family's past colliding with its present. In the moments after the box was secured, William made it clear he wanted answers. Witnesses described his tone as firm but composed, his voice carrying the authority not only of a prince, but of a son defending his mother's memory. He reportedly questioned Camilla directly, why the writings had been in her car, why they were hidden in such a manner, and why neither he nor his brother had been told of their existence. Camilla, caught under the glare of suspicion, tried to portray the matter as a misunderstanding. She claimed that her daughter had been safeguarding items of family importance, insisting that the box merely contained keepsakes and papers of little significance. But those explanations quickly crumbled under the emotional weight of what had truly been found. The box contained Diana's private words. King Charles, reluctantly drawn into the confrontation, found himself in a position no monarch would ever envy. On one side stood his son, visibly shaken yet steadfast, demanding that Diana's writings be treated as sacred relics of her life and legacy. On the other stood his wife, defending herself against accusations that, though unspoken, carried the unmistakable implication of betrayal. Charles reportedly called for calm, urging everyone to focus on the facts rather than the fury swelling in the room. Yet his appeals for reason could not quell the storm building between William and Camilla. It was Princess Anne who added further gravity to the exchange. Known for her directness and unflinching sense of duty, she is said to have insisted that the writings did not belong to any individual but to the nation's history. To her, the letters were far more than personal mementos. They were fragments of a story the public had a right to understand, especially given Diana's enduring place in the hearts of millions. Her words sliced through the tension like a blade, making it unmistakably clear that this was not a matter that could be quietly set aside without consequence. The room, thick with unease, became a stage for clashing interpretations of what Diana's legacy truly meant. For William, the letters represented a deeply personal bond, a window into the mind of the mother he lost too soon, revealing her innermost struggles during the darkest years of her life. For Anne, they were historical artifacts that could not be buried without betraying the people who had loved Diana so fiercely. And for Camilla, they were something else entirely. A scandal waiting to erupt, one that could endanger her already delicate public image. And for Charles, It was a crisis threatening to unravel years of meticulous image management, dragging him back into the role of the man forever overshadowed by Diana's memory. Security had been summoned to secure the power box, but what they couldn't contain was the wave of mistrust now sweeping through the family. Whispers spread swiftly across Clarence House. Aides spoke in hushed tones, guards exchanged uneasy glances, and a sense of impending catastrophe hung over the palace like a storm cloud. It was no longer a question of if the public would find out, but when and how much damage the fallout would cause once the story escaped beyond the palace walls. At the center of the confrontation, William's actions became the defining focus. His insistence that the box remain under strict protection, his refusal to let the issue be brushed aside with excuses, and his visible frustration at Camilla's explanations all cemented his image as a prince determined not to compromise on his mother's memory. To those present, it was unmistakable. William saw himself as the guardian of Diana's truth, unwilling to let it be concealed or forgotten any longer. Camilla, by contrast, appeared increasingly cornered. Her defense, that the writings had been safeguarded by her daughter, sounded weak against the growing tide of suspicion. Why in her car? Why in a locked steel box? Why under the cover of night? Each question chipped away at her credibility, leaving her more exposed than she had been since the earliest days of her marriage to Charles. The optics were disastrous. Diana's voice, once silenced, was now echoing powerfully through her son, and Camilla had no convincing explanation for why those words had been hidden in her glove box. Charles's decision to summon security only underscored how grave the matter had become. This was no longer just a family issue. It was about control, accountability, and the desperate effort to protect the monarchy from collapsing beneath the weight of its own secrets. Yet even as the box was carried away, under guard, the truth had already slipped free. Too many had seen what lay inside, too many had witnessed the confrontation, and too many now understood exactly what it meant. The palace could lock the steel box away, but it could not lock away the questions now swirling around it. As dawn broke, the royal family found itself fractured by suspicion and division. William, Charles, and Camilla now stood on opposing sides of a battle that was as much about perception as it was about truth. And in that fragile space, the seeds of scandal had already begun to grow. Soon, the story would leak. Soon, the tabloids would roar. And soon, Diana's voice would be heard again, not through speeches or appearances, but through the private words she had left behind. The confrontation was over, but the fallout was only beginning. What started as a midnight discovery in a glove box was about to erupt into a worldwide storm of outrage, grief, and demands for answers. At the heart of it all stood William, carrying the weight of his mother's legacy, and Camilla, whose credibility had been shattered in a single night. This was the moment the monarchy's foundations began to tremble, not because of outside forces, but because of what had been hidden within its own walls. And as the world would soon come to learn, the box of truth could not remain sealed. When the steel container was first opened inside Clarence House, only a select few laid eyes on its contents, but secrets that explosive were never destined to stay confined for long. What truly ignited the scandal were the shocking revelations written in Princess Diana's own hand. These were no ordinary letters. They were pages of her most intimate thoughts, penned during the years following her divorce, a time when she felt both liberated and deeply afraid. Once those words began to spread beyond the palace walls, there was no turning back. The contents of the box told a story the world thought it already knew, but had never fully heard from Diana herself. In her flowing, unmistakable handwriting, she described long nights of loneliness at Kensington Palace, her hopes for her sons and her fears for her safety. Some passages read like diary entries, raw, immediate, and haunting, while others were letters to trusted friends who had once been her lifelines. Together, the writings revealed a portrait of a woman navigating newfound freedom, yet acutely aware of the dangers that surrounded her. One letter in particular stood out. Diana expressed deep concern that her position left her exposed, that she often felt watched and unprotected. For those who read it, the words carried an unsettling chill. This was not the composed tone of a public figure, but the raw plea of a mother fearful for her future. When William saw the words written in his mother's hand, the impact was beyond description. Witnesses said he became visibly emotional, gripping the papers as if trying to bridge the divide between past and present. To historians and archivists, the significance of these writings was invaluable. To the family, however, they were explosive. The revelation that Camilla had been in possession of them, concealed in her car, was inconceivable. It hinted not only at secrecy, but also at intent. Whether that intent was to protect them, preserve them, or, as some darkly speculated, to exploit them for personal gain. Camilla's long-standing ties to the art world only intensified speculation that the letters might have been viewed as collectibles rather than sacred remnants of Diana's legacy. At this point, the palace's grip on the narrative began to crumble. Whispers escaped. Aides spoke to trusted journalists off the record. And within mere hours of the discovery, hints began surfacing in the tabloids. By the following morning, headlines screamed of Diana's hidden letters. Though the contents remained undisclosed, the mere implication was enough to ignite a media firestorm. The frenzy was instant and unrelenting. Reporters swarmed outside Clarence House, camera crews surrounded Kensington Palace, and online platforms erupted with speculation. Hashtags like Diana's Voice and Box of Truth trended globally. People demanded answers. What had Diana written? Why had it been concealed for so long? And how had the letters ended up in Camilla's possession? The emotional power of Diana's words, once excerpts began leaking, was overwhelming. Snippets appeared in print, her fears for her safety, her hopes that William and Harry would grow up strong, and her doubts about those around her. These fragments reignited a flood of grief and compassion for Diana. Candlelight vigils appeared outside Kensington Palace almost overnight, with mourners leaving flowers, notes, and photographs as if she had only just been lost. For many, the scandal tore open wounds that had never truly healed. Meanwhile, the monarchy faced an unfolding nightmare. Every effort to control the narrative backfired. The harder they tried to suppress the leaks, the louder the speculation grew. To the public, it appeared to be a cover-up, and nothing fuels public suspicion faster than the sense that the truth is being hidden. But in this case, the truth had already escaped. It was written in Diana's own hand, her voice echoing through time, reminding the world of her vulnerability and humanity. Camilla's explanations, already fragile, crumbled under the weight of the leaks. The image of her as a guardian of Diana's writings made little sense when compared to the reality, that they had been sealed in a steel box, concealed in a car, and nearly spirited out of Clarence House under the cover of night. Her insistence that they were harmless keepsakes rang hollow once the excerpts revealed otherwise. The blow to her reputation was swift and severe. William, meanwhile, emerged from the scandal in a starkly different light. The public saw him as the defender of his mother's legacy, the one who acted decisively when the writings were uncovered. The image of him solemnly escorting the steel box became iconic in itself. Photographs showed him walking with the weight of history in his hands, as though Diana's voice had been entrusted back to her son. That imagery spread across front pages worldwide, cementing the view that William had fulfilled his role as protector. Yet the most devastating blow for the monarchy was not the media storm, nor the reputational damage to Camilla. It was the growing demand from the public. People didn't just want to hear about the letters, they wanted to see them. Protesters carried signs calling for full disclosure, insisting that Diana's words belonged to everyone, not just the palace. Let Diana Speak became a rallying cry outside the gates, echoed across social media in countless posts and videos. The discovery had crossed a boundary. It was no longer a private royal scandal. It had evolved into a cultural reckoning. The monarchy was forced to confront a painful truth. Diana's story had never truly ended. And her words, once hidden, had returned to challenge the very institution she had once belonged to. Behind palace doors, crisis meetings grew increasingly desperate. Senior aides debated whether releasing limited excerpts might calm the storm, or if keeping the letters locked away was the only way to safeguard the monarchy's dignity. Yet every option carried risk, and with each passing hour, public outrage deepened. The longer the palace remained silent, the wider the scandal spread, and the more the public filled the void with speculation. The startling contents of the writings had accomplished what no commentator, journalist, or biographer had ever managed. They had made Diana's voice louder than ever before. Her words, penned in private decades ago, now threatened to shake the very family that had once sought to move forward without her. And all of it traced back to that midnight discovery in Camilla's glove box, the steel container that refused to stay hidden. The world had now glimpsed the whispers of Diana's heart, and nothing for the royal family would ever be the same again. By the time Diana's words reached the public in leaked fragments, the monarchy was no longer facing a quiet scandal. It was confronting a tidal wave of outrage unlike anything in recent memory. But it wasn't the security alert or the steel box itself that captivated the world. It was what the box contained. Diana's unfiltered voice, rising from the past to pierce the present. The effect was seismic, both within palace walls and across the globe. Outside Kensington Palace, something remarkable began to unfold. Crowds gathered almost instantly after the first leaks, carrying flowers, candles, and handwritten messages. Within hours, the scene resembled the mourning period following Diana's death. Thousands standing silently in vigil, softly singing or laying tributes along the gates. The air was heavy with grief and quiet defiance. To many, Diana had never ceased being the people's princess, and her private writings felt like a final testament, a connection the world had been deprived of for decades. On social media, the scandal erupted into a global movement. Hashtags such as Diana's Voice, Box of Truth, and Let Diana Speak trended worldwide for days on end. TikTok videos analyzing the leaked lines amassed millions of views. Instagram flooded with collages of Diana's photographs paired with her handwritten words. Twitter overflowed with threads dissecting what the revelations might mean for the monarchy's future. The internet made Diana's letters feel vivid and immediate, reviving her story for a new generation that hadn't even been born when she walked among them. Meanwhile, tabloids and broadcasters feasted on the scandal. Front pages displayed striking images of William escorting the steel box under heavy guard, the weight of history in his hands. Alongside them, they printed unflattering shots of Camilla, fueling the narrative of a queen consort caught red-handed with secrets she was never meant to hold. The contrast was undeniable. William, the devoted son safeguarding his mother's legacy, versus Camilla, the figure now accused of concealing that very legacy for her own motives. Inside Clarence House, the atmosphere turned poisonous. King Charles faced a relentless series of crisis meetings, each more tense than the last. Advisors urged swift action, pressing him to issue a statement that would demonstrate leadership. Yet every potential move carried risk. Defend Camilla too, strongly, and he would appear complicit in the concealment. Distance himself, and he risked publicly fracturing his marriage. The palace was paralyzed, and with every moment of silence, public outrage deepened. The fury was not confined to Britain. Across Europe, Asia, and the Americas, international news outlets led with the story on their nightly broadcasts. Diana's face appeared on screens in every language, her words translated into headlines that echoed universal themes of fear, hope, and fragility. Candlelight vigils appeared not only outside Kensington Palace but also in cities across the world. Paris, New York, Sydney, and Toronto all saw crowds of Diana's admirers demanding that her writings be released in full. The monarchy's image suffered a devastating blow. Overnight polls revealed Camilla's approval ratings plummeting, while William's soared. To the public, William embodied honor, integrity, and devotion to his mother's memory. Camilla, in contrast, was cast as secretive and untrustworthy. The steel box had become a symbol, a vessel of truth once hidden by one queen consort, but reclaimed by the son of the woman to whom it rightfully belonged. The backlash grew so fierce that protest groups began to form, gathering outside Buckingham Palace and Clarence House, chanting, "Release the letters, Diana belongs to the people." Placards bearing Diana's radiant smile, placed beside images of Camilla, turned the demonstrations into a striking visual assault on the palace's reputation. Night after night, the crowds swelled. Police were dispatched to manage the vigils, yet even their presence could not suppress the tide of grief and outrage. What made this scandal uniquely destructive was its emotional gravity. This wasn't about abstract policies or forgotten history. It was about Diana, the woman who had captured the world's heart, whose untimely death still haunted millions, and whose image remained frozen in time as a symbol of compassion and resilience. The letters had restored her voice, and in doing so, reawakened a collective sorrow that had never truly faded. Through it all, William became the center of attention. Every photograph of him clutching the steel box dominated front pages. Every clip of him leaving Clarence House was replayed endlessly. Commentators described him as carrying not merely the weight of a container, but the weight of his mother's legacy. To many, he embodied the devoted son defending Diana's honor, doing what no one else in the family had dared to do. The imagery was powerful, iconic, and profoundly moving. Camilla, in stark contrast, found herself increasingly isolated. Even her staunchest defenders struggled to justify how Diana's private writings had ended up in her glove box. Her pleas of innocence were drowned out by a wave of public fury. Every step she took, every public appearance was met with scrutiny, jeers, and at times, open hostility. Her position, once delicate, had become perilously unstable. By the end of that week, the monarchy faced one of its gravest crises since the days following Diana's death. The box had been meant to contain her words. Instead, it had unleashed them upon the world with greater force than ever before. And now, the palace had no choice but to confront the storm head-on. The vigils outside palace gates, the headlines blazing from every corner of the globe, and the online outcry demanding justice for Diana had made the situation impossible to ignore. What began as a midnight discovery in Camilla's car had erupted into a worldwide reckoning. Diana's voice was louder than ever, and the monarchy's silence was only making matters worse. The world was demanding answers, and until they came, the storm would not subside. The turmoil unleashed by the discovery of Diana's writings was no passing scandal. It etched scars into the monarchy that would endure for years, perhaps even decades. What started as a late-night confrontation over a steel container had evolved into one of the gravest crises to strike the royal family since Diana's death itself. And the consequences were not merely immediate, they were lasting, reshaping both public perception and the fragile balance of the monarchy's future. In the aftermath, approval ratings told the story with brutal clarity. Polls across Britain revealed a dramatic collapse in support for Camilla. Her legitimacy, always tenuous, now seemed irreparably damaged. Critics who had long opposed her role as queen consort felt vindicated, while previously neutral observers began to question her judgment, her position, and even her right to stand beside the king. Every appearance she made was shadowed by suspicion. The murmurs in the crowd, the stares from onlookers, the sharp remarks from protesters clutching placards. Everywhere she went, the weight of the steel box followed. William, in contrast, soared in public admiration. His measured handling of the letters, his insistence on their protection, and his steadfast stance during the confrontation cast him as the true guardian of Diana's legacy. The image of him carrying the box was endlessly reproduced, across newspapers, documentaries, and even murals painted by devoted admirers. It became a symbol. William, the son, carrying his mother's truth with quiet dignity and unshakable resolve. In a family often criticized for its detachment, he embodied warmth and devotion, qualities the public yearned for. But the scandal's reach extended far beyond reputation. Across the world, the fallout was immense. Across the Commonwealth, newspapers published editorials questioning the stability of the monarchy. In cities around the world, candlelight vigils continued for weeks, proof that Diana's influence had never truly faded. International media coverage portrayed William as a symbol of generational change, while Camilla was cast in the harshest of lights. It became a battle of images, and the court of public opinion had already rendered its verdict. The palace, desperate to contain the fallout, faced impossible choices. Some advisors urged transparency, to release the writings in full, allow the public to read Diana's words unfiltered, and thereby diffuse the leaks and speculation. Others warned that such a move would only deepen the wound, igniting endless scrutiny of every line Diana had written. In the end, indecision only made matters worse. Each day without answers fueled rumors. Each week of silence made the family appear increasingly secretive and divided. The long-term consequences soon became clear. Public trust in Camilla never recovered. For many, the scandal confirmed suspicions that had lingered since Diana's time, that Camilla would forever stand in contrast to the beloved princess, a comparison she could never escape. Even years later, the phrase, "the box of truth," remained shorthand for that fateful discovery. A symbol of the moment Diana's voice returned to haunt her successor. For William, the events marked a defining moment. He was no longer merely the heir apparent in the eyes of millions. He had become the guardian of his mother's memory, the figure who stood firm when silence would have been easier. His popularity soared to new heights, solidifying his image not only as a future king but as a moral compass within the family. His resolve to confront Camilla and insist on protecting Diana's writings distinguished him, more connected to the people, more in tune with their emotions. The global impact was equally profound. Across continents, Diana's story was retold through the prism of the scandal. Documentaries, books, and countless articles revisited her life, her struggles, and her enduring legacy. Younger generations who had never known her lifetime discovered her anew, inspired by her compassion and fascinated by the mystery of her private words. The steel box, once hidden in Camilla's glove compartment, had reignited Diana's presence in the world. And then there were the rumors. The steel box contained dozens of letters and diaries, but whispers suggested it was not the only one. Had Diana left behind more writings hidden elsewhere? Were there other caches waiting to be found? The speculation never stopped. And with every rumor came another wave of intrigue, another reminder that Diana's story still held secrets yet to be uncovered. Inside the palace, relationships were irrevocably changed. William's confrontation with Camilla left a wound that never truly healed. Trust had been shattered, and though public smiles would eventually return, the private reality remained far colder. King Charles, forced to navigate between son and wife, found himself diminished, his authority weakened by the perception that he had been caught off guard. Princess Anne's blunt insistence that the writings belonged to history, not to individuals, left its own impression, painting her as a truth-teller within a family struggling to maintain unity. But perhaps the most enduring consequence was the way the public came to view the monarchy itself. For years, the family had sought to move beyond Diana's shadow and present a new face to the world. Yet the scandal dragged them back, reminding everyone that Diana's presence was eternal. Her words, her fears, her love for her children, all had outlived her and all had returned in a steel box that refused to stay hidden. The image remains etched in memory. William, head bowed, carrying the box through Clarence House as cameras flashed and the world watched. That moment became iconic, a living symbol of a son bearing not just metal and paper, but the enduring legacy of his mother. It stood in stark contrast to the image of Camilla, caught in the storm of suspicion, her reputation slowly unraveling. One figure rose, the other fell, and the monarchy itself staggered under the weight of it all. Years later, people still speak of the Box of Truth as one of the defining turning points in royal history. Not merely because of what was written within those pages, but because of what the discovery represented: the persistence of Diana's voice, the fragility of the monarchy, and the sheer power of legacy to defy even the passage of time. King Charles's urgent call to security, William's unwavering stand, Camilla's crumbling defense. These were not merely moments in a scandal. They were chapters in a story that proved, once and for all, that Diana's light had never dimmed. And with every candle lit at every vigil, with every whisper of her words shared across the world, her presence only grew stronger. The monarchy may have survived the scandal, but it was forever changed. For William, the path to the throne became clearer, defined by his devotion to his mother's memory. For Camilla, the shadow of the glove box never truly lifted. And for the world, Diana's voice had returned, not to be silenced, but to echo eternally. When we step back and reflect on the shocking chain of events that began with that midnight discovery, it becomes evident why this has already been described as one of the defining crises of King Charles's reign. What began as a seemingly routine vehicle inspection spiraled into an unprecedented storm that captivated not only Britain, but the entire world. A single steel box, hidden inside Camilla's car, set off a series of revelations that may permanently alter the monarchy. The fact that Prince William himself ordered the box to be opened, in defiance of royal protocol and fully aware of the gravity of his actions, underscores the extraordinary tension and urgency at the core of this saga. The box itself has since taken on a near-mythical aura. Heavy, locked, and concealed in the most unlikely of places, It came to symbolize secrecy and betrayal. In the public imagination, it was far more than a container. It was Pandora's box. And when its contents were revealed to be Diana's personal letters and diaries, the emotional shockwaves extended far beyond the palace walls. These writings, described by insiders as raw, deeply personal, and imbued with Diana's fears and suspicions during her most vulnerable years, were never meant to resurface in such a way. They represented the unfiltered voice of a woman silenced far too soon, a woman whose legacy continues to cast a long shadow over the institution she left behind. For William, the discovery was not simply a question of ownership. It was a matter of honor. It was profoundly personal. In that moment, he was not merely the heir to the throne, but a son confronted with the words of his late mother, tucked away in a box that should never have been in Camilla's possession. His swift decision to intervene, to stand over the box as it was opened, and to ensure security was summoned, painted him as the guardian of Diana's truth. The public seized upon that imagery, and it's little wonder why. Photographs of William solemnly escorting the steel box into the palace became instantly iconic, contrasting his quiet resolve with Camilla's increasingly tarnished image. The scandal also laid bare the fragile dynamics within the royal family. Reports of a tense meeting between Charles, William, and Camilla only deepened the sense of distrust and division. William's insistence that the letters belonged not to Camilla's household but to the nation spoke to a broader truth, that Diana's voice could not be hidden away or commodified. Camilla's claim that the box had been safeguarded by her daughter as mere family keepsakes did little to ease suspicion. Instead, it only intensified speculation that the materials might have been intended for private sale, display, or other undisclosed purposes. The optics could not have been worse. The stepmother accused of locking the mother's voice inside her glove box. Then came the inevitable, the leak. Within days, the story had broken. Headlines screamed about Diana's hidden letters, while social media erupted in a storm of speculation and outrage. Hashtags like Diana's voice and box of truth trended worldwide, with millions demanding answers. Candlelight vigils soon appeared outside Kensington Palace, turning its grounds once again into a place of mourning and remembrance. For many, this was far more than another royal scandal. It was the reopening of wounds that had never truly healed since 1997. The memory of Diana remains sacred to countless people across generations, and the revelation that her private thoughts had been concealed in Camilla's car struck an almost unbearable chord. The public's reaction was immediate and ferocious. While Camilla's reputation, already complex, suffered a historic blow, William's approval soared. His stance as the protector of his mother's legacy resonated deeply with those who had long felt that Diana's voice was never truly heard. Charles, meanwhile, found himself in an impossible position. Calling security may have been necessary, but it also confirmed to the world that he had been blindsided by his own household. The unfolding narrative was not one of a united royal front, but of fracture, mistrust, and secrets spilling out in the most damaging way possible. And yet, amid all the turmoil and outrage, there is a sense that this moment has clarified something profound about the monarchy's future. The steel box, its contents, and the haunting images surrounding it, has carved a new chapter into royal history. One where William stands at the center, both heir and son, bridging the past with the future. His actions proved that the monarchy cannot simply bury or conceal its most painful truths. Diana's voice, once unearthed, refuses ever to be silenced again. And in defending that voice, William may have set himself apart as the one figure capable of carrying her memory forward. With authenticity, reverence, and integrity, the fallout continues to ripple outward. Tabloids remain relentless, dissecting every alleged passage from Diana's writings. Biographers and historians are locked in debate over what these revelations might mean for our understanding of her life and her struggles. Inside the palace, tension lingers. Officials quietly brace for the possibility that more letters or diaries could exist, hidden in yet undiscovered places. And the public, emboldened by the immediacy of social media, continues to demand that the full contents of the box be released for all to see. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of this scandal lies not in the content of the letters themselves, but in the symbolism of their discovery. The steel box in Camilla's glove compartment became the flashpoint for a story that intertwined secrecy, grief, and justice into a single, powerful narrative. It compelled King Charles to act decisively, propelled William into the role of defender, and reignited global fascination with Diana's everlasting presence. Long after the finer details fade, the image of William standing beside that box will remain, carrying not just the physical weight of steel and paper, but the emotional burden of a son bringing his mother's voice back into the light. And so, as this story draws to a close, the question still lingers. What happens next? Can the monarchy truly recover the trust it has lost? Will Camilla ever step out from the shadow of suspicion cast by this scandal? And most importantly, will Diana's words, her truth, ever be revealed to the world in full? These questions will continue to dominate royal conversations for years to come. What is undeniable, however, is that the moment William discovered that steel box in Camilla's car, prompting King Charles to summon security, has already been etched into history as one of the most unforgettable turning points in the modern monarchy. And if history has taught us anything, it is this. Once the truth is uncovered, it can never again be locked away.